Hey guys, it's Skylar here with another episode of TMP, the Musical Puppy, with my next installment of my crash course on how to read music. Last time we learned about note values and what they look like, as well as rest. And in this episode, we're going to talk about time signatures so we can actually learn how to actually make sense of those note values with actual numbers instead of just fractions. Alright, so I think it was important to do that one first, because this one wouldn't have made much sense unless you knew what a quarter note was, for example. Alright, so with time signatures, how they're expressed is if we have any given staff, you'll often see two numbers written written at the beginning of the piece. Alright, and there'll be two numbers, one on top of each other. And what this top number represents is how many beats in a measure. Just write that there. Alright, so that's how many beats are in a measure. And the bottom number is the note value that gets a beat. Alright, so and you read the time one right after the other. So you're going to read this. This is called 4/4 time. That's how you read it. So we have 4 beats in a measure, and you're going to read that as a fraction. So the quarter note is going to get the beat, right? Because it's like 1/4. So if we remember, the quarter note is this. Okay? So it's going to be 4 of those is what dictates the value of a full measure. Alright, so if we actually apply it to the staff, so as I said, we could have 4 quarter notes or any combination of things that makes up 4 quarter notes. So you could have 4 quarter notes, you could have 2 half notes. And after those 4 quarter notes are up, you have to have a line there to start a new measure because there's no more room left, right? And I'm just kind of writing it below for the sake of convenience. And you can kind of see how they line up. 2 half notes will make up a full measure. All right, you could have 2 quarter notes and a half note. That would be 1 full measure. You could have could have 8 eighth notes. And remember, we could write them this way, but more commonly, when they're together like that, you'll see them beamed. And this is equal to a whole measure in 4/4 time, because, each 2 is 1 quarter note, because they're eighths, they're half. That's why we talk about them in terms of fractions, to be able to break it up more easily. Alright? So if you were reading this in actual time, it would be like if you have any sort of pulse, like that dictates what the tempo or the speed of the piece is going to be. Let's just say that's 1 beat of this particular measure. So every tap is going to be 1 quarter note. Okay. And every 4 of them will make 1 measure. 8 of them would be 2 measures, because that would be 8 beats. But you can't fit 8 beats of quarter notes in 1 measure, so you gotta break it up into 2. So if we took this version of the measure, we go to that same pulse every 2. So one half note, second half note, and then the next measure. Alright, does that make sense? If we take this one, we have this pulse again. Quarter note, half note. Quarter note, half note. Alright, and this one down here, again, we have the same pulse. Each tap is going to be 1 quarter note or 2 eighth notes. Eighth note, eighth note, eighth note, eighth note, eighth note. Well, I'm not. Let me try that again. Slow it down a little bit so it's easier for my mouth to say in words. eighth note, 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 eighth note. There we go. I think I even had it right the first time. My mind went somewhere else for a second. But yeah, each tap, eighth note, 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 eighth note. All right, and you could have all sorts of combinations. You could have 2 eighth notes, a quarter note, and a half note. And that would be eighth note, quarter note, half note. And that half note will last for all 2 beats. Like my voice, so if I had to apply some sort of pitch to it, dun 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 dun. All right, that's how you're gonna read that. And of course, you could just have a whole note as the whole measure. So you would, and that's the whole measure. And that's really why it's called a whole note, because 4/4 time is the most common time you'll see. So that would take up the whole measure. There are other time signatures where whole notes would not be the whole measure, and even some where it wouldn't even fit in the whole measure. So for example, we could have another common one you might see is 2/4. So there's 2 beats in a measure now, and the quarter note still gets the beat. So you're only going to have 2 quarter notes, and then another measure, and then whatever else comes next. Like you could have a half note, and that would be the whole measure because there's only 2 beats of quarter notes. Okay? You couldn't use a whole note in this time signature because of the way it's broken up, it wouldn't fit. You would have to have 2 measures of half notes and put them together, and we'll talk more about that in a future episode, but that's how we're reading it. Another one you could have is 3/4, which is again the same. Just 3 quarter notes or any sort of combination of whatever, just to make up 3 quarter notes. And then a new measure, so you could have a half note and a quarter note. That would be a full 3/4 bar. Alright, does that make sense? Alright, and of course, as we also talked about, the rests also correspond accordingly. So let's go back. If we had 2 quarter notes and a quarter rest, that quarter rest, even though no actual sound is being produced in that time, is taking up a beat on its own because it's a quarter note, quarter rest that equals the value of a quarter note. And you could have a half note and a quarter note, and that would be the same. So in this case, if we have the tap, the pulse is 1, 2, 3, right? Quarter, quarter, rest. You wouldn't play. Quarter, quarter, rest. And if you move on to the second measure, it would be rest, quarter note. During the rest, you obviously don't play because it's a rest. But like I said, we look back in the last episode to see how we view these notes in terms of fractions, and now we're just applying them with actual numbers. All right. So let's look at some more kinds of time signatures. If we think we got that, I think we basically get the point there. Another very common time signature you'll see is 6/8. Alright, now this one can get a little confusing, so pay close attention. So now we have 6 beats in a measure, as well as the 8th note getting the beat. So if you remember, this is no longer getting the beat. It's now going to be an 8th note. So there's going to be 6 of these. 6 of these making up one measure. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now this is an entire measure on its own. 6 8th notes. Now, a common way you'll see them grouped is instead of 2s or 4s like we normally see, we'll commonly see them grouped like in groups of 3, because it's a nice even breakup. You often see it like that. And depending, so there's 2 ways you can even take this. So if it's slow enough, the pulse is kind of like this. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But sometimes, and this is a big part of like jig music. This is a very common thing in like Irish folk music, where you'll have this sort of feel, but it'll be a lot faster. It'll be more like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that would be like stupid to count. Like you wouldn't want to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over and over again. So a way we can break that up into groups of 2, like 2 groups of 3/8 notes each. So you'll actually be tapping twice for each measure, but it'll be 3 notes in each. This is called it's not simple time, it's complex time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? And you get that kind of a feel of like triples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is called simple time, where you just get 1 tap, and this is called complex time, where you group notes together. And there's other time signatures where we can see this too. We can see this too, but this is just the most common way you'll see it. All right, and we group these into triplets. That's what they're called when you have one beat fit 3 even notes inside of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can also write this in duple time. It's called duple time when the bottom note, when it's like a quarter note or a half note time, when the bottom note is 2 or 4. There's a way we can write that same feeling. So now this is a bit complicated too, but it's important when you see this because it happens pretty often. So let's go back to 4/4 time. All right. So we can group those same 3/8 notes together, but it won't be quite the same as in 6/8 time. Like, because if we had the pulse, you wouldn't get that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You get 1 and 2, 1 and 2, and it would be an incomplete thing. Like you could have eight of them together and it would work. But if you wanted to have that same triple feel in a time signature like this, then they put a little 3 underneath like that. That way you know that this takes up 1 beat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And you could do this with any note value. So the way you can think of it is that if you have a triplet of a particular value, in this case 8th note, it will take up the value of twice its note value. Let me explain that again. So we have 8th notes, right? And what's twice the value of an 8th note? It's a quarter note. So when you triple an 8th note, it's equal to the twice its value. So this triplet 8th note will equal quarter note time. So we'll get 1 tap. All right, it's a little tricky, but I hope that it was clear enough. All right, and let's do the same thing with quarter note triplets, because you can do that too. So you have 3 quarter notes, and in this case, if you just wrote it like this, that would be the end of the measure, because you would have triplet 2, 3, 4, because this equals a quarter note, as we set up here, and these are 3 quarter notes in their own. So that'd be 4 quarter notes. That would be the whole measure. But let's say you wanted a triplet out of the quarter notes. Well, again, they usually do a little bracket like this with a 3 like that. Here you don't have to do that because it's already beamed, so it's already got that connection to it, where you can tell that these two are grouped into a group of three. But usually just beam these, you do like a fake beam like this, like a little bracket, to group these into a triplet. And the triplet of a quarter note takes up the value of a half note, twice its value. So there would be 2 beats in this quarter note triplet. So let's go back to that pulse. We'll start at the beginning, and we'll just end the measure in a nice rest, so it's a full measure. All right, so grab that pulse one more time. Or eighth note. Let's not do it that way. Dun 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 dun. Oh, sorry. Let me try it one more time. It's a little hard when it's really slow, but I'm trying to. Triplet, 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 triplet. It's really hard when it's slow. If I had it a little faster, triplet, 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 that would be, if there were a little bit of a faster pulse, that would be the quarter note triplet. Triplet, triplet, taking up 2 clicks. Triplet, triplet, triplet. And we can go even further, and we can have a half note triplet, and that would be the whole measure, because a half note triplet would take up twice its note value, which is a whole note, so it would take up the whole measure in 4/4 time. All right, does that make sense? So we have that pulse. Triplet, triplet, triplet. That would be the whole measure, because you don't see this too often, but it's just good to know that if you see it, you'll most often see 8th note triplets, and you'll sometimes see quarter note triplets, but you'll most often see this. Alright, that's the most often common type of triplet that you'll see. Alright, and you can add triplets you can add rests to triplets too. Let's not use that one. Let's go back to the 8th note triplet. You'll sometimes see this, which is 3 8th notes, 3 8th note value things, in this case 2 8th notes and an 8th rest, in a triplet. So if we had the pulse, if the full triplet was that second one in the triplet will be a rest. So you have and that's how that works. Like I said, you can add rests to triplets too, and they function the same, just like the notes. They're just an absence of actual sound. All right, but the thing with eighth note time, you know, when you have an 8 at the bottom, is that it avoids the need to have to actually write out triplets, because they're just kind of built in with the way 6/8 or 3/8 or 9/8 or 12/8 time works. All right, and like I said, depending on the actual speed of the piece, you'll either count 6 clicks or whatever the top number is, or you'll group it up into triplets that are built in. Remember, for when you have 6/8 time or any 8 time, you could group them up into groups of 3, or they can be anyway, and you won't have to write the 3 underneath, because it'll be assumed based on the time signature itself. All right. Let's see what else. And I should also talk about, like I said, you can these numbers will apply. It's more important to understand the bottom note than it is the top note, because the top note is just how many clicks each measure gets, so it doesn't even matter. Another common type of signature is 2/2 time, also called cut time, because it's essentially the same as 4/4 time. It just has a bit of a different feel. This is the most common time signature you'll see in like marches and such, because it's basically the same as 4/4 time. It's 2 beats in a measure, but the half note gets the beat. So now there's 2 of these make up a whole measure, which is essentially the same as 4/4 time, because you could have 4 quarter notes and it would be the exact same as 4/4, but they just often use cut time because it often has a different feel. It's usually a little bit more spirited and quick and more like walking, because 2/2 time has more of a walking feel and a march to it. That's when it's most often used. But in terms of actually just counting, it's going to be the exact same as 4/4, but just don't let the 2 underneath trip you up that this is the note that gets to be. So every click or every tap or whatever you're using is going to be one of these instead of one of these. You got a bit of a like a half-time feel. Whereas before in 4/4, this was a quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note. But at the same pulse in 2/2 or cut time, half note, half note, half note, half note. And this is where you really got to understand your fractions, because if you saw this, you would have to know that it sort of acts like eighth notes, but it's going to be labeled as quarter notes just because we have the 2 at the bottom, and this is the note value that gets the tap. Quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, half note, half note. See, that's something you really got to understand. Alright, so like I said, it's really important you understand this number as opposed to the top number. The top number is easy. That's just how many clicks it gets. So you could have 4/4. You could have 2/4. You could have 3/4. You could have 6/4. You could even have 10/4. I've seen 10/4 before. But the only... like the top note, don't worry about that. It's the bottom note that matters. It's just that click will be one of these gets the beat. Okay? That's the important difference. And if you had 2/2 or 4/2, though I haven't really seen that too much. I've even seen 1/2. I haven't seen too many other ones other than that, but it could be any number. Theoretically, it doesn't matter. You just know that this is the note that will get the beat. So each click will be a half note, and you would just break up the rhythm accordingly by halves, because that's what we learned. Okay, 6/8, 3/8, 9/8, 12/8. These are the like common ones I've seen. Just remember for that this is what gets the beat. And because it's like a triple, like these are all in groups of 3, most of them, you won't really see too many. You won't really see 4/8 that often. It can happen, but 4/8 it would be more like a 1, 2, 3, 4. You couldn't break it up into triplets like you can with 6, 3, 9, and 12/8 time. All right. Just know that when it's a multiple of 3, you'll often be breaking it up into triplets. That'll just the way it goes. And like I said, you can have like 4/8 or even 5/8. I've seen that will most often you can break them up. It's a lot less common, so we won't worry about that right now. But just know that this is your basics. And like I said, you could even have like 6. Well, you could have like 12/16 or something. That would just mean your 16th note gets to be. But you don't see that a whole lot. But just know that it can happen, and it doesn't matter what the numbers are, as long as you understand that bottom number and what note value will get that beat. And I just want you to understand for triple time that if it's a multiple of 3, you can and probably will be breaking it up into triplets. This was a pretty long lesson, but I want to end it with something pretty easy, but just something you should recognize. When you have 4/4 time, you will see it written 4/4, yes, but most often, well, not most often, but equally as often, you will see it simply just written as a C, which means common time. And these two things equal each other. All right, so if you see C, it just means 4/4 time because it's common time. And also, additionally, if it's 2/2 time, you'll sometimes see it as that, like a C, like a cent symbol, but it's C it's common time cut, so cut time. So that's a pretty simple thing, but something you should definitely recognize, because you don't want to be looking at this and being like, well, what does a C mean? Is that something else? No, it's just a shortcut way to write type signatures. Alright, so this was a pretty full lesson, but it was a very important one. So if there were any questions, please feel free to leave them down below. I'll try to answer them. If any of your questions are not being answered in a future video, I want to try to make a video to answer those questions. And any and all comments are also welcome too. If you guys would like, I could try to, write out different rhythms and different time signatures in the, well, I will be doing it for the next, review tests after another lesson or two, just so we can kind of put a bunch of things together. But yeah, I hope this one was clear enough. I think as long as you understand note values, just adding the time signature part of it isn't too difficult. But yeah, hopefully this was easy to follow. And thanks for watching, and please come back for next time as we cover the next topic and how to read music.